Okay, good morning everybody. So we're out here. This is going to probably be the last video. I don't know that we're going to have any more after this, but what you have behind us is the Blackfin 29 that we've been doing the Black Widow spray job to. And this is just something that we've done. These aren't recommendations to you as to what you should do. You know, talk to your local rep to see what procedures you should follow for your area. But here in the Tampa, Florida area, what we went ahead and did is what we've described and showed you in the previous videos. I don't know if they're all going to be one video once we edit, or if they're going to be separate videos as to the stages we've done. But we'll see what we get in the final product, and this will be part of the series, or it'll all be one video. So if you remember, we went over the prep work of what we had done to the hull prior to spraying, the actual barrier coating of the spots that needed to be barrier coated, and then the actual finish of the sanding with the 80 grit prior to our first spray. Okay, so the first coat was put on there. We went with a total of 5 coats on the entire hull. We moved the stands, okay, and then we went with an additional 4 coats on those areas only, not 5. All right, the reason we did that is, you know, we allowed 1 day per coat on our application. So in other words, if we put on a coat at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is what we were generally trying to shoot for, just for the heat, you know, getting the warmest part of the day down here in Tampa, Florida. So we were generally trying to shoot around 2, and that would be 2 o'clock every day we were putting on a coat. Okay, I think one day, may have been the last day, we did put a coat on at 4, but generally we were getting 24 hours in between coats over the warmest part of the day is what we shot for. Okay, so that allowed us to get those 5 coats on. But then if you add up what it took to do that, 5 days later we're able to move stands. Okay, actually 6 days later, because you got 5 days you sprayed. Then the next day you come in and we're able to move the stands. So that's on the 6th day we move the stands. We sand everything out, and then we go ahead and start doing our stand areas. Well, back to that is we went ahead and allowed a day per coat on the stand areas, except for the last day. What we did do was we did an early morning coat, and then we did a late night coat. In other words, last thing of the day, probably around 5 o'clock I think it was, put another coat on, and we allowed that paint to sit an additional 2 days before we even wet sanded. So today is April 1st. I can't run. You'll be able to figure it out in the video, but I can't remember the exact day we finished our last coat on the, it was either Wednesday or Thursday, and this is Monday that I'm talking to you now. But we wet sanded on Saturday, this past Saturday. So you can add it all up. We allowed, I believe, after the last coat, we allowed 2 days before we actually wet sanded, possibly 3, okay? So our wet sand was a true 320, that's what we started with. If they made a 380, I would say that would be the application that we would start with the finish that we had with the spray equipment and application procedures that we used. Everybody's application procedures are going to be different, whether you brush, whether you roll, whether you spray, whether you're using a pressure pot, whether you're using an airless. Your finish coat is going to be different, so each and every wet sand application is also going to follow and be different. So in our case, we started out with a 320, and then we just came in and went right from a full 320 where we took almost all the orange peel out. Basically we left a little bit of texture, not much. Then we switched to a 600 grit, and we basically doubled over with a 600 grit. So if we wet sanded one area, you know, sweeping downward, we would go ahead and sweep back upward on that area, so basically gave it a double hit. We did not do that with a 320. 320 we just aimed to get rid of the orange peel, and then the 600 we just aimed to get rid of our actual sanding strokes from the 320 to smooth things out. So that was our thought process. We kind of cheated a little bit, as you may know, because you generally want to do, you know, your cutting sandpaper then your medium sandpaper, then your finish or fine sandpaper. But in this case, we just kind of cheated it, and I did it for time and for the fact that, you know, we're switching from sailboat to powerboat. Powerboat generally has a little bit more forgiveness because you got 2 engines, you can fire up and go straight into the wind. So that was the thought process. The temperature that I wanted to remind everybody about, okay? The temperature of the paint that we put on. I didn't go back and look through the video to see what we actually recorded. I didn't record this on a notebook, so I don't know what it was from a notebook recording, but I do know that it's recorded with what I told you on the camera. And generally I'm going to go from my memory on the temperature of what the substrate was, meaning the actual can of paint that we sat in the sun on the cooler days that we started. The temperature of the substrate was between 78 to approximately 84 degrees. I think it was 84 degrees on the last day we sprayed. All right. The actual ambient temperature, the outside temperature, what was surrounding us, okay, that was between 70 and 84 degrees that I can remember, okay? And the actual temperature for the hull, meaning, you know, what was on our hull, that was somewhere between 63 degrees, I think, was our low, and then our high, actually, on the last day, I think, was up around 80. So there was about a 17 degree window on the actual hull temperature. On the ambient temperature, we had about a 14 degree window. And then on the substrate temperature, meaning the actual paint that we were stirring and getting ready for the job, there was about a 6 degree difference. So if you're into all those numbers, they're there for you. You know, use them as you will. That's what we had, okay? One other point I wanted to make about the substrate. We mixed that with a battery operated drill motor. The first 2 cans, we had a friend mix them up on a paint shaking machine. Our third can, which we actually got into, by the way, with this 29-footer, we got into the third can, we got into it by a quart. So the total paint that we used for this job was 2 gallons and 2 quarts. And the thinning for that was 5%. We actually, on the actual spots that we finished up with, we may have pushed that to a 7. So 7% thinning. I personally like the 7% thinning. I really, the way that it sprayed at 7%, it was quite a bit different than 5%. However, this being used for the Pettit guys, you know, we're all in the terms of this paint. Maybe they're going to try and get something out of that. Maybe they'll turn us loose to let us do 7%. Don't know. I think we're going to find out in the pad areas where we did that. Is it going to have as good as a bottom paint protection, you know, for slime resistance and for barnacles and such? Is it going to perform as well or not? And that's what we're looking forward to once we get in the water. But this is being recorded so that we have data to test. Okay, this is the 7% areas. How do they perform as opposed to the 5% areas? One point I want to make there is that we thinned with a 121 thinner and not the 120. All right. The flash point on the 121, I believe, is a little bit higher. In other words, it flashes off faster. That's what we wanted. We wanted the spraying thinner from Pettit so that it just has a faster flash point. You know, generally what we used to do with the Trinidad paints, if you guys have ever used that, we would take in the middle of the summer, and instead of adding a spray thinner and spraying with a spray thinner, we would add a brushing thinner, meaning the 120, put that into the paint, and the flow of the paint was much better. It would take a little bit longer to tighten up. Flash point was a little lower, you know, it just wouldn't flash off as fast and dry out as fast. And what that allowed us to do is put on the appropriate millage, but also give us a finished product that had, you know, a nice surface or a nicer surface. So that's really the point. That's why we'd use the 120 for the Trinidad. However, in this case with the Black Widow, we stayed with the 121 regardless of where the temperature range started. And as a point, we started at 63 on the substrate. I'm sorry, on the boat, and then we ended up at around an 80 in one spot. So we just used a higher flash point because we were afraid of the buildup that your rep will represent to you. You know, just from what I get from the Pettit reps is that they're afraid of the buildup, getting too much buildup too fast. We getting the gassing or the entrapment of the thinners, and without letting the thinners out of there, the paint doesn't have its proper time, or what they're worried about, the paint may not have its proper time to cure off, do all its proper curing things, and get hard. So that being discussed with me, I kind of had that worry, and we kind of tried to protect ourselves from that. That's why we didn't even try the 7% until we just got to the stand areas. We stayed right at the 5% all the way through this on all 5 coats, see what we had, and we just started playing around a little bit with the stand areas. So I think I pointed out that, or started to point out that we had 2 cans that were shaken. We actually stirred those cans for an additional 15 to 20 minutes after we got those back, the first 2 cans, and we noticed this white film on the surface that we couldn't get to go away. Maybe you'll have better luck, but it looked like almost like a cloudy silicone or a milkish type appearance. When you had the mixer going inside there, you couldn't get rid of it. I don't think it hurt anything, personally. We didn't try and take it out, we just left it there. It sort of wanted to cling to the rims after you just let it sit. But we left it in there, and I believe it was silicone. I don't know that for a fact, but I believe it was some sort of silicone or slickener they have in the paint that just was either too much or leftover or what, but it happened in all the cans, so it wasn't just one can. It wasn't just in, you know, something that happened in one can. It was a consistent thing. So I want to point that out to you. I think what I want to do is end this part of the video with just my discussion of the video, just going over what I would say are some of the pros. Now I may miss some, and I may miss some of the cons. Okay, there's one con that stands out with this paint that I'm sure as time goes by, the manufacturer is going to try and figure out, because you know, it's just something that with their other paints that are available and the recommendations that we started out with the worries that we had, we only put on 1 coat per day. And you know, in the real world, here we are at the shop at my house, and we're able to not build up a storage bill of, you know, some companies are charging as low as, I guess, $15 per day. But you get to some other facilities where you're allowed to do your own work, or you're allowed to have work done by, you know, paid individuals. The charges from the yard will generally, in general terms in our area here in Tampa, Florida, be somewhere between $25 and $35 a day. All right, so if you add that up for basically a 9-day period minimum, a 10-day period, you know, you got $300 just in storage fees just to get the paint on, not including the wet sanding. So if you look at the scope of the job, what happened with this bottom not being able to put 2 coats on per day, we basically have a 3-week to 4-week time frame. Now that statement that I'm making includes the actual board filing of the bottom, okay? That includes actual repair of any dings or crevices that we would find, you know, imperfections. That includes coming back and 80 gritting in preparation for the first coat. That includes 2 coats of barrier, or 4 coats of barrier coat, that in the spots that needed it. And then that includes 5 coats of the Black Widow, and then on the entire hull, and then the moving of the stands, and then 4 more coats of Black Widow on the bottom. And we actually said, like I said, we pushed the back day to where we put 2 coats on in 1 day. So, you know, you add up that time frame, and for some people that may be unacceptable. I know that my clients will come into me and they'll say, hey, listen, it's 2 weeks out, can you get a bottom job done? Well, if we're applying Balderplate, or if we're applying Trinidad, or we're applying, you know, what was the other word I was looking for? I'm sorry. We're applying basically any type of paint. you can generally get 2 coats on per day. And when I say generally, that means that it's 1 coat early in the morning and 1 coat before you go at night. So that gives you about an 8 to 10 hour window, okay, depending upon how long your days are. And so with an overnight dry, you can come in the next morning, do the same thing. Just with this, and I think it's just a product of the manufacturer learning where they're at in the application procedures, and the product they're getting in all areas of the nation. They're just in a little bit of a learning cup here, and so the recommendations are that I've got were 1 coat per day. So we stuck by that, and here we go. So that was really the one con that I would come up with. The pros that I came up with are quite incredible. You know, one thing that we are very conscious of here at Gable Enterprises is that we don't like to put anything on the boat that doesn't belong there. In other words, if there's a lighter way to go, we want to go the lightweight way. This paint's extremely light. Didn't put it on a scale. I should have. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50% lighter than your normal copper bottom paint that has, you know, say 68 to 75% copper, cuprous oxide. So this paint, you know, we don't know all the secrets of the paint. I can just tell you it's lighter. It's about 40 to 50% lighter, which if you add up 2 to 3 coats of paint, or 2 to 3 gallons of paint on a boat this size, it's a substantial savings. You're probably between 20 to 30 pounds of savings just in the bottom paint. So for me, that's somebody that's weight conscious, big plus, really big plus. I can see the sailboats liking that, and I like that pro. Another pro is we didn't know this until we wet sanded. Once we wet sanded this product, wet sand's extremely easy. The finish that you get when you wet sand, as I told you, we did a 320 and then directly to a 600. The finish that you get, extremely nice finish. I don't know if you can see it, but we're going to bring you to it a little bit closer when I get done with my discussion part of this, and we'll just let you look at the difference of some of the wet sanded areas versus the non-sanded areas right now. We have one especially right here that will be able to be seen. We're going right here under this pad area. We kind of left the blacker non-sanded surface, and then you'll see the grayer. It's got a little bit of a gray tint to it. I actually think it's a really cool color, but you'll see the difference there. That's the sanded and the wet sanded paint that you're seeing there, the Black Widow. So the sprayability, you know, by only thinning this paint with 5% thinner, I just think that's a pro also. It sprays nice. I would, as I said it earlier, I would like to see it go to 7% max. Don't know if they'll do it. It's just my thoughts. I won't do it unless they say we can do it, but as I said, on the pad areas, that worked out. It was like 2 different animals. It really sprayed nice with the 121 thinner. And then the finished surface. The finished surface not only looks slick, but when you take your hand and rub it down there, you can tell there's something in there that's a slickener, and it's making this product very smooth and very slippery would be the word. So, you know, with that, we're going to kind of be quiet unless there's something else I can think of that needs to come along with this. We did sand through, this is another point, we did sand through after putting 5 coats on the hull, okay, and then 4 coats in the stand areas. We did sand through, and basically I was the guilty culprit out of our wet sand party, guys. I sanded through in kind of the sharp areas, and I did it in about 4 or 5 areas. I did it on the rudders in the back. I'm going to try and film that for you. I did it on the trim tabs also. Okay, now the trim tabs we may have left out for the first coat, and I can't remember. So my guys, my boy was spraying Bogdan. It's not his fault. We may have left that out and not hit it, and we may have left it out because at my request. I got to go back and look in the videos, but I believe we have 5 coats on there. The other area we went through was on the strut. We got carbon fiber struts in this boat, as I may have pointed out earlier. So on the carbon struts, on the trailing edge, I went through in 2 spots, and then up in the chine areas, up underneath this lip right here. You know, it's really, really hard. I went through in one area on this side and one area on the other side that I can remember. I don't think there's any other areas that we did go through. So the point being to that is, I think what you may want to do if you're applying this is get one additional coat on all the sharper surfaces. All right, so we did one. We did a light one in there. I think it needs to be 2. All right, so I would recommend, if you want to end up with 4 coats prior to your wet sand, I would recommend 2 coats extra on all your surfaces that are leading edges, trailing edges, sharp corners of the chines, your sharp corners of your strakings if you have them, or even just the center line of the boat. Trim tabs, the same thing. You know, on our trim tabs, I think I pointed out, were fiberglass, so you may not be dealing with it if you have stainless trim tabs, but because we have fiberglass trim tabs, we are spraying those with Black Widow, and it just had the normal primers, you know, barrier coat primers. It didn't have anything special for metal. And then the rudders, I think I also pointed out, the rudders are glassed over. They've been faired, and trailing edges are real thin, and so that's probably why we got into a problem on those areas. And then of course the carbon struts are really, really thin on the trailing edges. So, you know, anywhere you have these thin, I should say pointy areas, you want to definitely try and get 2 extra coats. My recommendation, you can do it as you feel. All right, I'm going to shut things down. One other thing I'll point out is, you may see we got a trial going on over here of Pettit's new metal gear paint. It appears to have it appears to basically be like a zinc galvanizing. I've used zinc galvanizing on trailers before. It has that look. When you look at the ingredients, there's different ingredients from it, but it's some sort of a modified zinc galvanizing that we've got to try out on the metal gear, and that's what you see there with the paperwork. Is we're going to give that, or you know, with the papered off areas, we actually sprayed it with the can, and then we came in and we did another proprietary thing over that because we want to see how that works. We may release that to you guys if it works, and if it doesn't, nobody will hear anything about it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take the camera, go around here, and let you guys visually see what's going on. Hopefully this has been a helpful video for everybody. And we don't know what it's going to look like when we get it, you know, edited, but hopefully it gives everybody something to go by, you know, a good basis. One thing we can point out is you can see how shiny it is. You can probably see the scratches in there. This has not been burnished at all. All right, this paint can be burnished. We are choosing to not burnish it, but it has an extremely shiny look to it. You can see the reflections. We have not, the other thing is to point out is we haven't put a rag on this to get off any of the sanding dust. So you'll see actual splotchy areas where the wet sand dust is gone. Okay. All the through hulls in this boat are flush mounted. We're going to put some intake carbon caps, custom caps for the engine intakes, and then we had specially machined through hulls put on here that actually, you know, just kind of suck in the water. You may be able to see them right there. They're specially machined so they're flush on the front side, and then the back side has a little cup to it so it'll suck up the water. Alright, those are for the air condition. One's for the air conditioner, one's for the seawater intake. We're going to back off back here and let you see some of what the difference of the color, and then I'll try and zoom in for the difference of the wet sand versus non-wet sand area. This is a stand area that we're just going to leave until we lift the boat, which is going to happen by tomorrow. And then the black areas that you see, you know, in this area here, this is just water that's coming down. It rained last night, so you're going to see water still left over on the hull. And I'll come in here and you can see over here. The amount of hours that were put into this, just so you can get a handle on that, is this was a true wet sand. In other words, we removed the orange peel, and there were 25 man hours put into this hull for both coats, meaning both wet sandings. So when I say both, as mentioned, it was 320 first, and then 600 later. We didn't separate the hours from the 320 to 600, but the total man hours was 25. All right. I think what added to that was just getting around each and every strake here. It was tedious getting around all the strakes. I was going to look for one of the areas that I sanded through so you could see, and I seem to remember it being over in here. Huh. Maybe it went away. Maybe it disappeared and I really didn't sand through. Alright, so here's one of them. You can kind of see the yellow flashing through the barrier coat. So, you know, just got a little too aggressive on those corners, and we cut through. Over here you can see the difference of the sanded, the wet sanded, and the non-sanded. So on these carbon struts that we built, you know, you can see some of the custom fairing that we did to it. We were trying some different things just for a lower drag. What we did up here is on this Blackfin 29, you may be able to see the perimeter of the box that's built. Well, we built plates for this box to cover the box, and we actually tucked our zinc for the shaft, or shaft zinc, up inside there. We haven't tried the aluminum shaft zincs yet, but we're going to on the next go around. These are two standard, just standard zincs that are in there, anodes, and they're inside this box. So when we need to change the zincs, it's a little bit of a hassle. We got to pull out these 2, 4, 6 screws, pop this down, you know, basically a fairing flap. It's fiberglass, and then go in and loosen your zinc, and then put that back up in place. So it's not too bad for the speed gains that we're getting out of it. We believe it's a very fair way to do it. Alright, let's see if we can see where I went through on trim tabs. It doesn't look like it was this side, it was the other side that I went through. And oh, and the other test we're doing here, everybody, is that on the back side, you'll notice there's been no wet sanding done back here. Okay, so we're going to see what kind of performance we get on the wet sand versus the non-wet sanded paint, just to see what we get. It's just a good way to test everything and give feedback back to the manufacturer. Pettit's been really good about everything here, so we want to be try to be as good as we can to them. Once again, you can see kind of the reflections that you're getting off. And just a reminder, you know, there's no wipe down that's even been done to that to clean off any of the dust. Alright, we're going to walk back one more time. I'm going to go around the other side and see if I can find those other areas that I sanded through, just so you can get a feel for how many coats you may want to put on. Just seems like I know I did the strut on this side. I know I went through. Yeah, so you can see right here where we went through to the barrier coat, and kind of up here also. And it sure seems like I went, yeah, on this trim tab. You can kind of see where we went through there too. So mostly the trailing edges of everything and the outer streaks. Alright, so that's it, guys. You know, you can send your questions to us. We'll get our contact information if you need on YouTube or however it's going to go out. We got no idea on that. I'm going to let somebody else do that. And we're going to try and get this out within the next 2 weeks so that anybody that's getting this paint can have a little bit of a guideline to what we've done anyhow. Alright, have a good day. It's Mike Gable signing off, and once again, you know, you guys need to do what you're going to do with your applications, and you know, talk to your rep, but this is how we did it. We're not making any recommendations to you. We're just telling you how we did it. So it's your baby. If you have a mess up, don't come talking to me. I am not the guy. All right.